So you're all welcome to this academic reflection on the new encyclical letter Fratelli, Tutti. So I would like now to invite the second speaker, who is Dr. Sahaya Selvam. He's a Catholic priest with the Salesians of Don Bosco. Originally from India, Selvam has been serving religious and academic contexts of East Africa since 1992. He has separate undergraduate degrees in philosophy, sociology, and religious studies, and 2 master's degrees in philosophy of religion and psychology of religion. He completed his PhD in psychology at the University of London in 2012. He has contributed to several peer-reviewed academic journals and written several books, the latest being Pastoral Psychology for Africa by the Paulins, 2019. He's currently a member of Global Research Team on Service Learning and Spirituality in Catholic universities worldwide. He defines himself as a priest, psychologist, and pedagogue. Welcome, Dr. Selvam.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nalugala, for your kind words of introduction. I'm also grateful to the organizers for inviting me into this very eminent members of the panel. I really feel privileged to be part of this discussion. And thank you very much, Aiden, for starting off our discussion with a very conversant input on the encyclical, providing background, very good background, even in the light of the Catholic Church's efforts in interreligious dialogue, especially with the Muslim community. My own approach here to the encyclical is from an educational perspective. And I just called my presentation Learning to Live Together. And you will understand why I call it that way. My presentation this evening is going to have 3 parts. In the first part, I would begin by looking at the vision of UNESCO about education in the 21st century. That provides for me the preamble to my title of Learning to Live Together. Then I would go into the encyclical, Fratelli, Tutti, and pick up elements that are related to education from that encyclical. Then finally, I'll make a short proposal on service learning as a methodology of guiding graduates, learners, to graduates in becoming agents of social transformation and in an effort to learning to live together. All right. So that takes us to the first part. And I understand I have only 15 minutes. And so I would go rather quickly with my slides. And I suppose you can look at my slides faster than hear my speech. All right. So in 1996, UNESCO appointed a committee or a commission to make proposals on the way forward for education in the 21st century. And this commission was led by Jacques Delors. And the output, which is a very brief document that you see on the screen, Learning the Treasure Within, was the fruit of the discussions that were held by the commission in terms of proposing a policy statement. A statement that will inform educational policies across the world in the 21st century. And they talk about 4 pillars of education, and that is going to be my focus. Often, formal education really does injustice to the human family by focusing on just imparting knowledge. Most of formal education across primary to tertiary level tends to enter into this temptation of just focusing on knowledge. But some of the formal educational institutions would integrate a second pillar. You can see if formal education solely depends on one single pillar of imparting knowledge, it is very precarious. So it has become a fashion these days to say, oh, we not only impart knowledge, but also skills. But using the terminology of the UNESCO document that I referred to of 1996, it says it is 21st century education is not going to focus on imparting knowledge, but imparting methodologies of acquiring knowledge. That's why they call that first pillar learning to know. Second pillar then is learning to do. It is not about skills, but a set of competencies that are highly agile and adaptable. But where the document becomes interesting is that they add two more pillars. Learning to be, it's about character formation, value systems, a moral development of the learner. And finally, learning to live together. Actually, the document talks about learning to live together as a basis for all other pillars. In fact, even in learning to know, in acquiring knowledge and methodologies of acquiring knowledge, we can practice collaborative learning. So our focus here, from the perspective of providing a premise or a preamble to our discussion on Fratelli, Tutti, I like to focus on this pillar of learning to live together. So this is a summary: learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, learning to live together. And speaking about this pillar of learning to live together, the document says, I have divided that paragraph into three parts to highlight three dimensions of that paragraph that talks about learning to live together. I'm still with that UNESCO document of 1996. It says, by developing an understanding of others and their history, traditions, and spiritual values. This is UNESCO talking, not the Holy Father. Yet, on this basis, creating a new spirit, which guided by recognition of our growing interdependence to manage conflicts in an intelligent and peaceful way. Sorry. Because we know we are wasting a lot of resources in the world today, all sorts of resources, because we are struggling to learn to live together. So this becomes a fundamental aspect of all other pillars of education. So this slide breaks down further. There are four dimensions of learning to live together. First, we need to be aware and understand the differences, specific identities of individuals and groups of people, appreciate that difference and cooperate, and in such a way that we can build a peaceful society. So having established that premise from a very secular perspective, I like to look at in my second part of the presentation on the encyclical Fratelli Tutti, which is the subject of our discussion this evening. And I like to focus on education to fraternity. The document is about fraternity and social friendship. So how do we educate people, young people, all of us, to fraternity and social friendship? Interestingly, I, as an educationalist, as Dr. Nalugala introduced me as one of my titles, I like to call myself a pedagogue, someone who reflects about education. I would have loved to see a small section on the document on what type of education that is needed in this world, in the contemporary world of the 21st century, so that we can shared fraternity and social friendship. But it is not there. But the concept of education runs across the document. And different terminologies are used. Often it talks about cultivating, forming, building, and sometimes the word education itself is used. It talks about education to fraternity, education to dialogue, education to solidarity, education to integration, cultural, political integration. So let me quickly make a few comments about education to these 4 dimensions that stand out in the document. First is cultivating fraternity. The document, you will always see the reference at the bottom of my slide. It talks about, it says fraternity is to be consciously cultivated. So it does not happen by chance. It is something that needs to be educated to through formal education, through dialogue, through the recognition of values of reciprocity and mutual enrichment, what the UNESCO document called interdependence. Secondly, in that connection then, it also talks about, Fratelli Tutti talks about cultivating dialogue. And here is a quotation. What is important is to create processes of encounter, processes that build a people that can accept differences. Let us arm our children. Okay, that's beautiful. Though the arms sounds very violent here, but interesting. The Holy Father is using the word arm and weapon of dialogue. Let us teach them to fight the good fight of culture of encounter. Then the third type of education is in cultivating solidarity. Okay, so the Holy Father says solidarity is the product of personal conversion. And this personal conversion has to be achieved through education and formation. And who will achieve this? Who will facilitate this education and formation? We need to start with families, parents, and formal schools, and the media. Talks about the communicators having a deep responsibility in cultivating solidarity so that we can facilitate this personal conversion. And finally, cultivating integration, cultural, economic, and political. Again, a quotation, number 151. Cultural, economic, and political integration with neighboring peoples should therefore be accompanied by a process of education that promotes value of love for one's neighbor. Okay, so I have highlighted 4 aspects of cultivation, 4 aspects of formation that will lead children, young people, and adults towards fraternity and social friendship. Well, now, how do we achieve this in formal education? I'm going to focus on formal education here, especially tertiary level education. Okay, so there is another church document from Pope John Paul II called Ex Corde Ecclesiae, which really gives a framework for Catholic education. And it says the Christian spirit of service to others for the promotion of social justice is of particular importance for each Catholic university to be shared by its teachers and developed in its students. So what is this document saying? That Catholic education has an obligation in the formation of agents of social transformation among their students, so that when they become graduates, they become agents of social transformation. So this is how I would define social transformation, as a set of processes in which individuals and groups of people enact or enable social social change with an aim of enhancing quality of life. So often formal education, especially tertiary level education, focuses on career and goals. But is it sufficient? Would it make people happy individually and as communities? I come from a psychology background, and psychology says career alone cannot make people happy and enjoy well-being. We need spirituality and what psychology calls intrinsic motivation, and Fratelli Tutti calls gratuitousness. In fact, it is spirituality that would motivate people towards gratuitousness. And then what we have is purpose in life. And this purpose in life intrinsically is related to somebody's commitment to social transformation. As this psychologist defines purpose, William Damon, one of my favorite psychologists who has done research on purpose, he says it is a stable and generalized intention to accomplish something that is at the same time meaningful to the self and consequential for the world beyond the self. In the light of Fratelli Tutti, I think this definition of purpose as even a desire to achieve something beyond the self is very telling and very relevant. So I'm towards the end of my presentation. So how do we achieve all this? Service learning. What is service learning? Education that will achieve social transformation through service learning. So service learning can form the mediating role of accompanying learners in an educational context to become agents of social transformation, because it can generate, when people are compassionately involved in service to others as they learn, people become contemplative, people become spiritual, and that promotes gratuitousness. And then there is a continuous motivation to become agents of social transformation. So what is service learning? Service learning is different from just sporadic community services that many universities or educational institutions engage in. It is also different from internship that is career-oriented, professional-oriented, whereas service learning is a reciprocal relationship between the learner and the beneficiary, in which the learner is accompanied to integrate into their learning the encounter with the beneficiary by means of reflection. So it is not something that is done at the end of learning, but during learning as something that is integrated into learning. So Pope Francis is often fond of repeating this, that education has to integrate the head in terms of learning information, heart that moves towards motivation, and hands that makes people become agents of social transformation. Thank you very much.